Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. How do you do, dear students? I hope that you are doing well. We begin with the second weekly lecture in sociology. Today we would try to know the various methods of study, what is social research, how to conduct the social research, what are its do's and don'ts. Before we proceed further, as we had referred to in the first sociological lecture, that there are various sociological approaches or perspectives that we need to know. The first one is structuralism. Structuralism focuses on the large-scale social structures wherein people play defined roles. So this is a macro or larger or bigger understanding of various social structures of society. It is a macro understanding of society. Structuralists look at society as a set of structures in which individuals play definite roles. It is structure-centered, and individuals are not seen as important as the defined social roles and actions are. So, the pivot in this sociological perspective is not individual, it is the social structure. Structuralists study individuals in terms of these defined social structures. The best example of structuralist perspective is suicide study that was carried out by Emile Durkheim in 1897. It was almost 123 years ago. Unlike many common sense perceptions that suicide is an act of individual caused by private troubles, Durkheim tried to explain that suicide is linked to the way societies are organized. Suicide rates are persistent in one group of people or a country and significantly different than the other group or country. Durkheim showed that social forces, social causes of action lay behind these actions. Families and religious association are the examples of such social forces in consideration. Strong connections of such social forces lead to a lower suicide rates and vice versa. Durkheim tried to explain the correlation and causation between social variables. Although it's an extensive study, but we would just draw a simple conclusion for us. Individuals within a defined social structure have little freedom of thought and action, although they may think they have it. But the reality is that we are driven and manipulated by these social structures. Society controls our lives. Individuals are like puppets, and certain hidden social forces are pulling the strings that make individuals behave as they do in a particular situation at some of times and or all of the times. If we just try to have an understanding of it in this simple picture, so larger, greater, macro social structures would have a set of ascribed statuses, defined or in fact predefined roles for us, and we act like puppets where the strings are in the hands of these larger, greater social structures. Now, this correlation versus causation. Correlation when two social variables are related to each other, but their causation cannot be proved. For example, abundant social media usage is related to depression. This is not necessarily a causal relationship, as we see depression cases without extensive social media usage, while, on the other hand, social media usage without any depression at all. So, social media usage and depression, social media usage and depression are related to each other. There is a correlation, but this cannot be directly proven. As against correlation, when we move on to causation, we find when there's a strict link between two variables and that can be proven. For example, smoking causes an increased risk of cardiac complexities. The next sociological perspective is interpretivism. This is, unlike structuralism, a micro understanding of the social world. Interpretivists believe that individuals have the strings of society in their hands. People shape the social structures of societies they live in through their thoughts and action. This is individual-centered approach, looking at societies through the individual's end, focusing at social identities of individuals that we acquire and try to acquire. Now, what these social identities are, just a handpicked of them for our understanding: sex and gender realities, ethnic identity, age, social class, nationality, occupation, roles within a family and other social groups, memberships of a religious or political organization. In all social groups and societies, we are given certain labels, and these can be a part of our identities. We may or may not take them for granted. We accept some of these labels and reject others. Now, this behavior of acquiring or accepting some of them while rejecting some of them, it is going to signify, or it is going to typify us through a certain patterned behavior, and doing so create a certain set of meanings and identities for us. But the prioritization matters. The prioritization differs. For someone, a certain social identity or this labeling or this tagging might be so crucial, but for others it might not be the same. For someone, a political or religious identity might be the primary one, while for others, another identity is more important than this one. Interpretivists see that accepting or rejecting these identities are caused by the interaction between us and others. Our identities bind us to certain social groups, refrain us from certain other groups, and define how are we likely to behave in a particular social environment. This approach tries to discover what meanings people give to their thoughts and actions and how they interpret the social world around them. Now, this kind of perspective is best used in studying crimes or delinquency. For example, an interpretivist would like to know what the people involved in any such crime had to say about what they did and not just what happened. So, an interpretivist approach would like to know that once there is a crime, people are arrested and they are investigated. So let's see their color of the occurrence and how are they likely to explain what happened, what they did, and not just what happened. This is crucial in studying, this kind of perspective is crucial in studying juvenile delinquency, career counseling, and criminology. Now, as we studied causation and correlation, in the similar fashion, consensus and conflict are the two key terms that at this point we need to understand. Consensus. What is consensus? Basic agreement on a set of shared values. For example, hospitality and jirga in our culture. Conflict, disagreement between different social groups with different interests. Sociological understanding is a continuum of consensus and conflict. There is not any such society or a social group, micro or macro, that would have 100% of one and 0% of the other. It would always be a blend, a composition of them, of both of them. Consensus and conflict give birth to different sociological perspectives to study society and social life. Whether we are going to look at the realities of social world in a micro perspective or in a macro perspective. As we studied earlier, that consensus and conflict are the two situations that would always be there in every social institution or group. It's like the trichotomy relation of inequality of two real numbers in mathematics. If we have x and y, so x is equal to y, or x is greater or lesser than y. We might have a greater course of consensus and a lesser course of conflict, or the vice versa, or equal. Ideally, this is going to happen in such a manner. Functionalism approach is based on consensus view. It asks what functions does this side of society perform to keep society stable and allow it to continue. Functionalists look at society as a human body where an equilibrium is attained through different functions working together in close coordination. It means that this is a kind of social organics. As we have a human body, so if one organ is going to malfunction, if it's not going to work properly, the entire body, the physiology or the functionality of entire body is going to suffer. It is exactly in the same manner that if there would be a certain aspect or side of society or any social institution that is not going to work properly, so it would have its consequences, it would have its kickback, and that would be all over the said social group or institution or even society by large. One malfunction in the organic or social body causes a series of malfunctions, and this is interlinked in one way or the other. Then we have another, that is Marxism approach. This is based upon conflict view. It is on the basis of the sociological perspective or social theories developed by Karl Marx. It argues that modern industrial societies are based upon basic conflict between different social classes of the society. A conflict between haves and haves not. The two main classes are bourgeoisie and proletariat. The owners of wealth and property are called bourgeoisie. The working class is classed proletariat. The bourgeoisie class exploits the proletariat, and the proletariat has no choice but to work if they are to survive. The proletariat class is never paid the full value of their work, and the bourgeoisie class controls and owns the real value of the work of proletariat. So, this Marxism approach is of tremendous importance in the historical course of human beings. In 1917, the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, and later on the Chinese cultural or socialist cultural revolution, all these are the outcomes, the direct or the indirect outcome of Marxism approach. Now that we are done with this, we try to find out what is there in your weekly lecture notes. We have to know the methods of study, cross-sectional study, longitudinal study, laboratory study, field study, observational study. Some key terms that we need to know: scientific method, steps in scientific method, social variable, social constant, experimental group, control group, and then research dimensions and mechanics, research ethics, principles and practices. We begin our understanding of these key terms with one single term: theory. In everyday life, theory is something else, but in scientific world, this term has a technical meaning that is entirely different than its literal meaning. A scientific theory is not the word in its literal sense. In science, theory means a set of various proven facts integrated together to explain various phenomena. Now, if it's natural science, so we are going to integrate various natural phenomena. And if it's any of the social sciences, so we are going to explain or integrate various social phenomena. In natural sciences, kinetic theory, valence bond theory, germ theory, or cell theory are the examples. In social sciences, theory of population, identity theory, deterrence theory, etc. are examples. More particularly, in sociology, structuralism, functionalism, or symbolic interactionism and role theory, etc. are the examples. A scientific theory is an outcome of continued and generalized research. This is not the product of any opinion that may be right or wrong, and is not supported by an experiment and observation in a scientific manner. Now, the question arises how to make a use of these theories, or where from these sociological theories came. We'll find the answer to these questions in the following lines. Our sociological investigation begins with our observations around ourselves. When we start thinking about the social processes around us, we are doing an investigation, no matter that may not qualify to be professional, technically compliant, but that is somehow a kind of scientific inquiry into the nature of social realities around us. To begin properly, however, scientific investigation is not just observing the social realities in an easygoing manner. It is more definite, regular, and patterned. This method of observing social phenomena is an objective manner. This is scientific study where it is objective, where no personal opinion, belief, or like and dislike, bias and prejudice is going to affect our judgment. In sociology, like any other scientific discipline, be natural or social, we begin our social research by developing a hypothesis. Its plural is hypotheses. A hypothesis is always acquired and evolved from a social theory. A social theory is the bigger picture, is the larger picture, is the broader perspective. A theory is too broad in general, while a hypothesis that we develop from a theory is narrow, direct, and testable. We can verify that cause-effect relationship that we have hypothesized. A hypothesis is prediction of the cause-effect relationship that we have framed for testing. When it is researched, it would be proved either or disapproved. Means it would establish the cause-effect relationship either or reject it. There is a clear, precise, and definite yes or no, approval or disapproval. It is mandatory to know that whenever we are going to conduct scientific method of study, scientific investigation process, so the data that we are going to collect would be of these two types. It is mandatory to know the two main types of data that we collect out of our research here: quantitative and qualitative. Quantitative data is expressed numerically, that reflects the who, what, when, and where of social behavior. Who, what, when, and where of social behavior. While qualitative data is non-numeric data that reveals the quality of a relationship. It tries to find why of the social behavior that we are investigating. The two types of data, based on its collection, based on the time of its collection, is primary data and secondary. Primary data is the first-hand information collected personally by the researcher, and secondary data is the type of data that already exists. Said so, we resume to our main discussion. We begin with hypothesis again. What is a hypothesis that we start our research with? A hypothesis is a research design of testable origin that the research is designed to test. Scientific study can simply be defined as systematic, organized series of steps that ensure maximum objectivity and consistency in researching a problem. Systematic, organized series of steps that ensures maximum objectivity and consistency. The following are the main steps involved in scientific method of study. Define the problem, review the literature, formulate a testable hypothesis, select a suitable research design, collect and analyze data, and develop the conclusion. And then we need to write a report regarding the conclusion. Please have a look at this. Define the problem, review the literature, formulate a testable hypothesis, select a research design, collect and analyze data, can be like survey or observation, experiment, existing sources, develop the conclusion, ideas for further research, and this is going to be cyclic in nature. All the social variables that we need to observe can be of two types, dependent and independent. But before we begin to define the two, it's compulsory, it's better to revise and revisit what do we understand by a social variable at all. It is better to start with a simple definition of a social variable. A social variable is any social characteristic, number, or quantity that can vary among a sample or population that can be measured. A dependent variable is the variable being measured with changes in response to the independent variable. And an independent variable is the variable that is changed in an experiment. A simple and comparative analysis of the two can be as under. If you just have a look at this simple table, so the left column, these are independent variables like education, age, health, social status, and income. And the right column, these are dependent variables like phone calls made, access to social media, cigarettes smoked every day, cell phone brand trend, responsiveness during telephonic conversation. So, when we are going to interlink any of the social phenomena, when we have a hypothesis, a research design, a testable research design, we can go through either of these and check what the actual relationship is. Any variable that needs to be maintained at a fixed quantity would get to be a social constant. We can have education, like if we have a sample and we are going to execute a study and we find that we need to put that as bachelors or masters or the doctors or postdocs or high school students or people who would have finished with their high school. Similarly, age can be a precise and optimum age group in terms of class intervals, like from 30 to 40, 35 to 45, mid-30s, mid-40s, like that. Health can be categorized in terms of healthy, casual, reckless, or careless, or sick, and so on. Social status or income. A social constant is a characteristic or value that does not change across an observation. An experimental group, we would always have to have two groups, an experimental group and a control group. When we execute, we expose them to the same conditions and then find out that the changes that were observed in experimental group. So the control group is there to quantify the validity. If we would have the same results, so it means that the results that we would collect from experimental group are verifiable and valid, and we can archive or we can record them properly. An experimental group is the group exposed to the independent variable during an experiment of social research. while a control group is the subject not exposed to the independent variable to ensure the validity of the results during an experiment of social research. In any social research, two things are important to know about the possible results: validity and reliability. Reliability of the result means that when the research can be repeated and similar responses will be obtained, while validity means when the result findings accurately reflect the reality that it is intended to capture. It's something comparable to, or something we can go through, or we can draw an analogy of precision and accuracy in physical sciences to this. Methods of investigation. A sociologist has a number of methods that he or she can conduct social research with. The design depends on the size of data to be collected, the nature and extent of the research objective, and the modality of the social variables involved in that particular study. Almost all research designs need a pilot study. Now, what a pilot studying is? A pilot study is a small scale test of a piece of a research project before the main research is to be conducted. This is a trial run of the main design, and it is processed for a limited number of samples. The following is a brief account of various quantitative and qualitative methods of sources and sources of data that sociologists use. Primary quantitative methods: questionnaires. These questionnaires can be closed-ended or open-ended. Structured interviews, content analysis, experiments, laboratory experiments, field experiments, longitudinal survey, cross-sectional survey. Comparative analysis is a comparison of different cultures, cases, and situations to understand their similarities and differences. Secondary quantitative methods: official statistics, government and others. Primary qualitative methods: interviews, semi-structured, unstructured, and group interviews. Observations: non-participant observations and participant observations, that in German is called Verstehen. Case studies, semiologies. Secondary qualitative methods: documentary sources, official, organizational, individual. Now, dimensions and mechanics of research. There are four main steps involved in every research. These are the conspicuous or major constituents of the dimensions: style, purpose, time, and data collection technique. If it comes to style, a research can be one of the three, two of the three, or three of the three: exploratory, descriptive, and explanatory. Purpose of research can be basic or applied. Time of research can be cross-sectional or longitudinal. Data collection techniques can be quantitative and qualitative. In quantitative, numerical expressions providing counts and measures. In qualitative, meanings, concepts, definitions. Quality through words, images, videos, and description. Now here's the continuum. To the left we have qualitative, and to the right we have quantitative. Naturalistic observation, ethology, participant observation, ethnography, case studies, archival research, questionnaire research, applied and field research, experimental research. Research ethics. Research ethics are, by and large, the norms of conduct, behavior that distinguish between the right and wrong patterns of behavior. Research also has predefined ethical standards. A brief review of ethical standards for research is given in the following. We have the British Sociological Association and American Sociological Association. So, the BSA, the participant must not be harmed. The participant's informed consent must be obtained. The researcher should not invade participants' privacy. Participants should not be deceived. ASA, professional competence, integrity, professional and scientific responsibility, respect for people's rights, dignity and diversity, social responsibility, human rights. Research ethics considerations include being open, honest, and truthful, not harming the subject in the course of conducting the research, protecting the anonymity of the research subjects wherever applicable and possible, and not misrepresenting themselves to the research subjects. Conclusion: research is interactive and integrated. There is no hard and fast divide between the two types that one has to carry out a quantitative research or a qualitative research. There is no hard and fast divide. Every research is essentially interactive and integrated. A working pattern of how closely quantitative and qualitative research designs are is given as under theory, hypotheses, observations and data, and patterns. We might go this way up or this way down. It's all the same. Now, these are some of the key terms that I expect you to get yourselves familiar with. Researcher effect, causation, Hawthorne effect, overt observation, covert observation, sampling and sampling techniques, random sampling, stratified sampling, quota sampling, snowball sampling, social surveys, respondent, response rate, representativeness, subjectivity, trend, triangulation, positivism, bias, objectivity, sampling population, sampling frame, generalizability, rapid, replication, research method. These are the terms that I expect you to learn. Have a nice time. Take care of yourselves and we'll keep in touch. Assalamu alaikum.